This is the Forbidden Zone. Where are the anomalies?
Minister, there are no anomalies. Those gravity fields are artificial.
Unidentified fleet. Cut your engines and hold.
Sirens wailed across the crippled refugee fleet as it plunged into Sector 44G, the galaxy's most feared graveyard. Pursuit ships closed in, ready to slaughter. The refugees expected cosmic anomalies and swift death. Instead, they crashed into the backyard of the most terrifying, unpredictable species in the cosmos: humanity. The Bridge of the Ethelgard, flagship of the remaining Xelarian refugee fleet, was a symphony of sparks and despair. Smoke hung thick in the air, smelling of scorched copper and melted silicon. Minister Veylor clung to the primary holotable, his four-fingered hands gripping the edges so tightly his knuckles turned a translucent violet. "Shields are down to 14%! Shouted Commander Rin from the tactical pit, frantically swiping across her glowing console. "The Krellar Vanguard is closing the gap. They are charging plasma lances. We cannot take another volley, Minister." Veylor stared at the tactical map. The glowing red icons of the Krellar Ascendancy fleet outnumbered their pathetic, ragged convoy of civilian transports 50-1. For 3 solar cycles, the Xelarians had been hunted. Their homeworld was glassed, their planetary defenses shattered by the Krellar's fanatical crusade to purify the outer rim. Now, millions of terrified refugees huddled in the cargo bays of repurposed freighters, waiting for a miracle that the cold, indifferent universe was never going to provide. There was only one path left, a dark, terrifying void on the galactic map that every civilized species avoided at all costs. "Set coordinates for Sector 44G, Veylor commanded, his voice trembling but resolute. Rin froze, her auditory appendages twitching in sheer disbelief. Sector 44G? The Forbidden Zone? Minister, that space is quarantined by the Galactic Council. Ancient telemetry states it's a graveyard of crushing gravity wells, volatile stars, and hyper-aggressive anomalies. No expedition has ever returned. It is suicide." "The Krellar are executing our children, Rin," Veylor replied, meeting her horrified gaze. "If we stay, it is guaranteed genocide. If we jump into the Forbidden Zone, we face the unknown. I would rather our people be consumed by a black hole than slaughtered by Krellar executioners. Initiate the jump sequence. Now." With a heavy, resigned sigh, Rin punched the commands into the navigation matrix. The fleet's archaic subspace drives whined in protest, shaking the bulkheads until it felt as though the Ethelgard would rattle apart at the seams. Outside the viewport, the pursuing Krellar cruisers fired a devastating volley of blinding blue plasma. Before the searing energy could melt through their vulnerable engines, the subspace rift tore open. The refugee fleet tumbled violently into the tier, escaping into the abyss just as the plasma lances vaporized empty space. The transition was violent. Null space travel was normally a smooth glide through the underlying dimensions of reality, but jumping into Sector 44G felt like dragging a ship over jagged glass. The fleet dropped out of subspace with a sickening lurch, gravity stabilizers failing and plunging the bridge crew to the deck. Slowly, the emergency lights flickered on. Veylor groaned, pulling himself up by the edge of the holotable. Rin was already back at her station, tapping her console with frantic desperation. "Report," Veylor rasped, tasting copper in his mouth. "We survived the jump," Rin said, her voice filled with awe and confusion. "But, Minister, you need to see this. The sensors are going insane." The main viewport shutters slowly rolled back, revealing the dreaded Forbidden Zone. Veylor braced himself for a hellscape of collapsing nebulas and rogue black holes. Instead, he saw something that defied all Xelarian logic. It wasn't a natural graveyard. It was an industrial leviathan. Sensory data log. Xelarian Class 4 sensors. Stellar anomaly detected. G-type star. Status: obscured. 90% of stellar output is being captured by a megastructure grid. Material: titanium tungsten alloy. Radio traffic: overwhelming. 4.2 billion localized transmissions detected. The star in the distance was not dying. It was caged. A colossal, geometric web of metal encircled the burning sphere, siphoning its energy in a feat of mega-engineering that the Galactic Council had deemed theoretically impossible. Debris and asteroids had been hollowed out, laced with glowing blue thrusters, acting as colossal cargo haulers moving seamlessly through the void. "By the ancestors," Veylor whispered, his eyes wide. "This isn't an anomaly. The gravitational disruptions, the radiation spikes. It's not a natural phenomenon. It's industry," Rin realized, her voice trembling. "Minister, we are detecting massive vessels approaching on intercept vectors. Their energy signatures are primitive, pure, thermonuclear, and kinetic, but the sheer scale." A proximity alarm screamed. From behind a nearby metallic moonlet, a shadow eclipsed the stars. It was a warship, but it possessed none of the sleek, elegant curves of Krellar cruisers or the organic, crystalline grace of Council vessels. It was a brutalist wedge of gunmetal gray, jagged and scarred by micrometeorites. It looked like a flying anvil designed solely for utility and violence. Along its massive, armored flank, massive white symbols were painted in an alien script. The ship's automated translator slowly began to decode the chaotic radio waves bleeding from the vessel. "They are hailing us," Rin swallowed hard. "Audio only. Broadcasting on all open frequencies." Veylor nodded. "Put it on the speakers." A burst of static filled the bridge, followed by a calm, slightly bored, and unmistakably biological voice. "Unidentified fleet. You have breached restricted commercial airspace belonging to the Terran United Systems. You are currently in the path of the General Dynamics orbital mining lane Alpha Niner. Cut your engines and hold position for customs inspection, or you will be fired upon. This is Captain Arthur Pendleton of the UNS Vanguard. Acknowledge." Veylor and Rin exchanged bewildered looks. Terran United Systems? General Dynamics? The terrifying apex predators of the Forbidden Zone were. A corporate bureaucracy? "Captain Pendleton," Veylor stammered into the comms, hoping the translator was working. "We are refugees of the Xelarian Republic. Our fleet is heavily damaged. We meant no intrusion. We are fleeing a hostile force." Before Veylor could finish his plea, the bridge was bathed in a harsh, pulsing red light. The subspace sensors wailed with a completely different, terrifying pitch. "Minister!" Rin screamed. "Subspace ruptures. The Krellar. They followed us." Space tore open like wet paper as 30 Krellar Ascendancy cruisers dropped into real space directly behind the Xelarian refugee fleet. The sleek emerald green warships bristled with glowing plasma batteries. To the Krellar, the Forbidden Zone was merely a myth designed to frighten the weak. Their fanatical doctrine demanded the complete extermination of the Xelarian species, and no galactic quarantine would stop them from claiming their prize. On the bridge of the Ethelgard, panic erupted. "They are locking weapons!" Rin shouted, frantically trying to route emergency power to the civilian transport's deflectors. "Plasma batteries fully charged! Minister, we have nowhere left to run!" Veylor closed his eyes, preparing for the blinding heat of annihilation. "May the ancestors welcome us," he whispered. But the fatal blow never came. A heavy, booming voice crackled over the open frequency, not from the Krellar, but from the brutalist gray anvil of the UNS Vanguard. "Emerald vessels entering Sector 44G, you are violating commercial lockdown protocols and brandishing active weapon systems in a heavily trafficked Lockheed Martin Stellar Solutions construction zone. Stand down immediately and power off those glowing glow sticks, or I will consider this an act of piracy." The Krellar fleet commander, a zealot named Xylus, laughed a harsh clicking sound that was broadcast across the local net. "Unknown primitive vessel," Xylus sneered over the comms. "We are the Krellar Ascendancy. This sector, and all these pathetic Xelarians, belong to us by divine right. Flee back to your mud world, or burn with them." On the Vanguard, Captain Arthur Pendleton, a man who had spent the last 20 years dealing with corporate red tape, bureaucratic nightmare audits, and the general headache of securing human space, let out a deep sigh. "Right. You were warned. Weapons control, spin up the max. Let's clear the lane." What happened next defied everything Veylor knew about space warfare. The Galactic Council relied on plasma, lasers, and particle beams, elegant energy weapons that required massive power grids and specialized shielding. Humanity, apparently, still believed in the undeniable logic of throwing a very heavy rock very, very fast. From the nose of the UNS Vanguard, 4 massive magnetic accelerator cannons flared to life. There was no bright beam of light. There was only a blinding flash, a ripple in the vacuum, and the sheer, devastating application of kinetic energy. 4 depleted uranium slugs, each the size of a school bus, accelerated to a fraction of the speed of light. Impact. The Krellar energy shields, designed to absorb and dissipate heat and energy weapons, simply failed to comprehend physical mass moving at that velocity. The shields flared blue, then shattered like brittle glass. The kinetic slugs tore through the lead Krellar cruisers from bow to stern, ripping their polished, elegant hulls into thousands of jagged, spinning fragments. The kinetic force was so immense that the vacuum around the Krellar ships briefly ignited from the sheer friction of the metallic debris colliding with escaping oxygen. Rin's jaw dropped in absolute horror and awe. 3 Krellar heavy cruisers, gone, in less than a second. Targeting lock established on secondary vessels. A synthetic human voice announced casually over the open tactical net. Warning: Northrop Grumman automated defense grid has detected hostile energy spikes. Suddenly, the space around the refugee fleet lit up. The hollowed-out asteroids, the mining drones, and the massive industrial platform surrounding the caged star began to pivot. Hundreds of hidden missile silos and point defense railguns unmasked themselves. The entire solar system was a fortress, heavily weaponized and heavily commercialized. The Krellar fleet, recovering from the initial shock, returned fire. Beams of superheated plasma struck the Vanguard. Veylor winced, expecting the blocky ship to melt. Instead, the plasma washed over the Vanguard's hull, scoring the thick, unpainted titanium armor, but failing to breach it. Humans didn't rely on fragile energy shields alone. They built their ships out of meters-thick ablative armor designed to take a beating and keep flying. "Scratch the paint," Pendleton muttered over the comms. "Open fire, all batteries." The void erupted. The Vanguard unleashed a horrifying barrage of nuclear-tipped missiles, flak screens, and continuous railgun fire. The human weaponry was brutal, deafening even in the silence of space through the sheer interference it caused on the sensors, and terrifyingly efficient. The Krellar, realizing too late that they had not entered a graveyard, but had rather kicked the door into a heavily fortified armory owned by heavily armed paranoid primates, tried to turn their ships around. It was a massacre. The vaunted Krellar Ascendancy fleet was systematically dismantled into floating scrap metal within 4 standard minutes. On the Ethelgard, the silence on the bridge was deafening. Veylor and Rin watched the radar screen as the red dots vanished, replaced by a cloud of expanding debris. The comms crackled back to life. "Xelarian refugee fleet. This is Captain Pendleton." The voice was calm, entirely unfazed by the absolute carnage he had just unleashed. "Looks like you folks are having a rough day. My engineers are scanning your vessels. You're leaking radiation, and your life support is on the fritz. We're dispatching a Boeing Airbus search and rescue squadron to assist with repairs and medical aid. Welcome to Terran space. Please try not to bump into the defense mines on your way in." Veylor slumped back into his command chair, his heart's pounding in his chest. The Forbidden Zone. The place the galaxy feared because nothing ever came back. It wasn't monsters, and it wasn't natural disasters. It was humanity. And for the first time in 3 years, Minister Veylor felt completely, undeniably safe. "Rin," Veylor breathed out, wiping a hand across his exhausted face. "Yes, Minister. Send Captain Pendleton our deepest gratitude. And ask him if these Terrans are currently accepting asylum applications." The transition from the crippled Ethelgard to the sprawling interior of the human orbital installation was a blur of chaotic efficiency. The facility, designated as the SpaceX Amazon Orbital Logistics Hub 9, was a staggering monument to human industriousness. It was a metal city suspended in the void, large enough to possess its own localized weather systems and gravitational zones. Minister Veylor and Commander Rin were escorted through a series of massive airlocks by a squad of human marines clad in bulky matte black exosuits, bearing the insignia of Lockheed Martin Tactical Solutions. The humans moved with a heavy, purposeful cadence, their faces hidden behind opaque visors. To the Xelarians, whose technology was built on sleek organic aesthetics, the humans appeared as lumbering golems of war. Yet, the moment they stepped into the triage center, the brutalist facade dissolved into a bewildering display of compassion and hyper-commercialized medicine. Triage Bay Alpha, medical log. Capacity, 50,000 beds. Sponsor, Johnson & Johnson Advanced Biosystems. Status, overflow protocols engaged. Thousands of Xelarian refugees were already being processed. Drones zipped overhead, dropping sanitized blankets and nutrient packets adorned with the smiling blue logo of Walmart Interstellar. Human medics, shedding their heavy armor for sterile white coats, moved rapidly among the wounded. Minister Veylor? A voice called out. A human male approached, wiping a smear of glowing blue Xelarian coolant from his cheek. His name tag read Dr. William Carter. He held a sleek tablet, tapping it with an ungloved hand. "I am Veylor," the minister replied, his voice raspy. "My people, the radiation from our failing engines." "Already handled," Dr. Carter said, with a reassuring, weary smile. "We've deployed Pfizer medical nanites into the atmospheric scrubbers of your civilian transports. They bind to heavy isotopes and flush them from the biological system. Your people are stabilizing. The malnutrition and physical trauma will take a few more hours, but nobody else is going to die today. You have my word." Veylor stared at the doctor, utterly bewildered. You cure radiation poisoning via airborne aerosols? The Galactic Council classifies such localized nanotechnology as a class, one heresy. Dr. Carter chuckled, a dry, cynical sound. "Yeah, well, the FDA took a decade to approve it, but we aren't exactly answering to the Galactic Council, are we? Come with me. The director wants a word with you." Veylor and Rin were led out of the medbay and onto a glass-enclosed transit monorail. As the train accelerated through the station, the true scale of human engineering revealed itself. Beyond the reinforced glass, they could see the caged star. Giant collector arrays stamped with General Electric logos drank the sun's fury, beaming raw microwave energy to millions of orbiting factories and shipyards. "Commander," Veylor whispered to Rin, "the Galactic Council told us this sector was a cosmic anomaly, a graveyard of crushing gravity wells and natural disasters." "I am scanning the local data nets," Rin replied, her eyes wide as she looked at her data pad. "Minister, there are no natural anomalies here. The crushing gravity wells are artificial localized fields used for manufacturing dense alloys. The rogue black holes are localized warp gates for their massive freight lines. The Council, they lied. They didn't lie, exactly. They just rebranded us," a sharp, authoritative voice interrupted. The transit doors hissed open, revealing a spacious, minimalist boardroom overlooking the stellar forge. Standing at the head of a massive obsidian table was Director Evelyn Shaw. She wore a sharp, tailored suit, exuding an aura of absolute authority that commanded the room without a single weapon present. "Welcome to the Terran United Systems, Minister," Shaw said, gesturing to the seats. "I am the Regional Director of Sector 44G's Joint Corporate and Military Operations." Veylor sat down, his 4 hands resting nervously on his lap. "Director Shaw, I do not understand. Why would the Galactic Council quarantine your entire species behind the myth of a forbidden zone?" Shaw poured herself a glass of amber liquid from a crystal decanter, offering a small smile. "Because, Minister Veylor, about 150 years ago, humanity made first contact with a Council exploratory vessel. We were eager to join the galactic community. We shared our art, our culture, and most importantly, our economic models." Shaw took a sip, her eyes narrowing. Within 6 months, Terran corporate conglomerates had shorted the Council's central currency, acquired hostile majority stakes in their 3 largest automated mining guilds, and accidentally crashed the economy of the Orion Spur by introducing high-frequency algorithmic trading to a society that still relied on gold-pressed bartering. Rin blinked in shock. You crashed their economy? We didn't mean to, Shaw shrugged, but rather than adapt, the council panicked. They realized that human industry, driven by our deeply ingrained hyper-competitiveness, would economically conquer their entire civilization within a decade. So they labeled us a Class 5 bioeconomic hazard. They erected a quarantine zone, scrambled the navigational beacons, and told the galaxy that this sector was a graveyard filled with monsters. And you just accepted this isolation? Veylor asked. Accepted it? Shaw laughed, a genuine sound of amusement. Minister, they gave us a perimeter of 3,000 light-years of unmapped, resource-rich space and promised no one would ever bother us. It was the greatest real estate acquisition in human history. We've been building, expanding, and fortifying ever since. Before Veylor could fully process the sheer absurdity of human nature, a blaring, rhythmic klaxon shattered the calm of the boardroom. The ambient lighting shifted to a dark, menacing amber. Shaw's demeanor instantly turned to ice. She tapped her wrist. Console. Report. Director Shaw, the voice of Commander David Bradley, crackled over the intercom. We have a massive spatial rupture on the edge of the quarantine perimeter. It's the Krellar Ascendancy. They didn't just send a hunting pack this time. We are painting over 300 capital-class dreadnoughts. Veylor's hearts plummeted into his stomach. The hope that had blossomed in his chest withered instantly. 300. Director, you cannot fight that. That is an execution armada. They have come to finish my people. Shaw looked out the massive window at the caged sun and the billions of tons of human engineering swarming around it. Commander Bradley, Shaw said smoothly, put me through to Admiral Montgomery. The edge of Sector 44G was boiling with raw thermal energy as the Krellar Ascendancy Armada tore into real space. 300 emerald green dreadnoughts formed an impenetrable wall of plasma and hate. At the center of the formation was the Vanguard of Purity, a flagship so massive it possessed its own gravitational pull. On the bridge of the human flagship, the UNS Eisenhower, Admiral Richard Montgomery stood with his hands clasped behind his back. He was an older man, his hair silver, his uniform pristine. He watched the tactical display with the mild annoyance of a man whose morning coffee had been interrupted. A transmission forced its way through the Eisenhower's firewalls. The main screen flickered, revealing the snarling, reptilian face of Krellar Supreme Warlord Zarkarn, flanked by a trembling, pale alien wearing the robes of a Galactic Council diplomat. Humans! Zarkarn hissed, the translation software struggling to capture his guttural rage. You harbor the Xelarian filth. The Galactic Council has granted us temporary immunity to enter your quarantined filth zone. Surrender the refugees immediately, or we will cleanse this sector of your primitive megastructures and your species. Montgomery did not flinch. He leaned forward, tapping the comms button. Warlord Zarkarn, I am Admiral Richard Montgomery of the Terran United Systems. I think there has been a slight misunderstanding regarding interstellar law. There is no law but the Ascendancy, Zarkarn roared. Actually, there is corporate law, Montgomery replied calmly. You see, approximately 40 minutes ago, the Xelarian refugees accepted medical aid and nutrient supplements provided by our corporate sponsors. Under the Raytheon-Tesla Mutual Assistance Act of 2194, in lieu of immediate galactic credits, the refugees signed a digital Terms of Service agreement. On the SpaceX terminal, Veylor and Rin watched the broadcast in stunned silence. Terms of service? Veylor asked, looking at Director Shaw. We merely pressed the accept rune on the data pads to activate the medical nanites. Exactly, Shaw smiled wickedly. No one ever reads the terms of service. On the screen, Montgomery continued. By accepting those terms, the entirety of the Xelarian refugee population is now legally classified as indentured corporate interns of the Terran United Systems. They are our employees, which means they are human assets. The council diplomat on the screen stepped forward, looking terrified. Admiral Montgomery, please, this is a technicality. The council does not recognize. The Council doesn't recognize a lot of things, Montgomery interrupted, his voice dropping an octave, losing all trace of bureaucratic politeness and revealing the cold, predatory steel beneath. But I suggest you recognize this. Under the Terran Castle Doctrine, any unprovoked aggression against human assets or corporate property on our soil is an act of war. You have 10 seconds to turn your fleet around and warp out of my commercial shipping lanes, or I will authorize lethal force. Zarkarn laughed, a booming, arrogant sound. Lethal force? With your archaic kinetic weapons against 300 dreadnoughts? We will burn your star to ash. All vessels, charge primary plasma lances. Target the medical stations. Montgomery sighed. 10 seconds is up. May God have mercy on your souls, because human industry will not. Montgomery turned to his tactical officer. Authorize override code, Prometheus. Spin up the Dyson array. The response was instantaneous. Override accepted. General Electric Solar Siphon rerouting power from Sector 7. G. Northrop Grumman targeting telemetry locked. G. From the viewport of the station, Veylor gasped. The colossal cage surrounding the star began to shift. Millions of mirrored solar panels, each the size of a city, rapidly aligned. The energy of the captive G-type star was no longer being funneled into automated factories. It was being weaponized. They are focusing a star, Rin whispered in sheer, unadulterated terror. That's impossible. Nothing is impossible with sufficient budget and zero regulatory oversight, Director Shaw noted proudly. A beam of pure, concentrated solar plasma, a nickel Dyson beam, erupted from the megastructure. It was not a laser. It was the raw, unleashed fury of a sun, focused into a blinding pillar of white-hot destruction that completely ignored the vacuum of space. The beams struck the Krellar Armada. There were no explosions. There was no dramatic battle of evasive maneuvers. The Krellar energy shields, designed to withstand standard naval combat, simply evaporated in a microsecond. The vanguard of Purity and 80 surrounding dreadnoughts were instantly vaporized, their molecular structures disassembled by the sheer, overwhelming thermal energy of the concentrated star. The beam held for exactly 1.4 seconds before shutting off, leaving a massive gaping hole in the fabric of space where the heart of the Krellar Armada used to be. Only glowing dust and hyperheated slag remained. The surviving Krellar ships, positioned on the flanks, immediately powered down their weapons. Panic and absolute horror flooded their open comms channels. Admiral Montgomery's voice cut through the chaos, cold and entirely devoid of mercy. As I was saying, you are trespassing on private property. The toll for using this shipping lane is 80 capital ships. Consider your debt paid. Leave now. The remaining Krellar dreadnoughts didn't even bother to turn around. They initiated blind, emergency slip space jumps, tearing themselves out of the system in a frantic, desperate bid for survival. In less than a minute, the invincible armada was gone. Silence descended on the boardroom. Minister Veylor fell to his knees, his hands trembling as he stared out at the human megastructure, the cage star, and the endless stream of automated cargo ships resuming their routes as if they hadn't just witnessed the wrath of a god. For 3 years, the Xelarians had run from the monsters of the galaxy. They had been hunted, slaughtered, and abandoned by the civilized council. They had thrown themselves into the abyss, expecting the darkness to consume them. Instead, they found humanity, a species that monetized survival, weaponized their own sun, and defended the helpless over a legally binding medical contract. Director Shaw walked over and gently placed a hand on Veylor's trembling shoulder. "Welcome home, Minister," she said softly. "Orientation for your people begins at 0800 hours tomorrow. We have a lot of rebuilding to do." Veylor looked up at the human, tears of absolute relief streaming down his alien face. The Forbidden Zone was not a graveyard. It was a fortress. And for the first time in the history of the cosmos, the prey were finally standing behind the ultimate predators. Did this thrilling sci-fi adventure keep you on the edge of your seat? The universe is vast, but human determination and our absolute refusal to back down is truly limitless. If you loved this epic tale of survival, corporate megastructures, and humanity stepping up as the ultimate protectors, hit that like button right now. Share this video with your fellow sci-fi fans, and don't forget to subscribe for more amazing daily HFY stories. See you in the next one.